to the Transformational Podcast, a conversation between brothers about practical ways faith is impacting our lives. We invite you to join us on this journey as we are learning to let faith transform the way we live. We are glad you are with us today and look forward to sharing our journey with you. Now let's jump in. Welcome to the Transformational Podcast. We're glad you're back. Chris is adjusting his hat because he can't decide which way he wants to wear it.
Well,
he can't decide.
Oh, there we go. I didn't like the shadows on my face. I was trying to figure out how to fix the shadows.
Well, I don't know how many of our friends watch, but I'm sure they can. I'm sure they don't really care about the shadows on your face. Yeah. Now, for our friends who listen, if it sounds like I've got a little bit of a cold, that's you're accurate. I do have a little bit of a cold, but
no, he's just channeling his inner Barry White.
Yeah, well, it's pretty,
Barry White or Barry Manilow. It's Barry Manilow, isn't it?
That's buddy, I don't even know who you're talking about, but I'm gonna go. Okay.
Okay.
Anyway, it was your spring break this week, right?
Well,
did you?
Pastors don't necessarily get a spring break, but it was my kid's spring break. Yes, it was.
What'd y'all do?
Fantastic. So what's really cool is that we've got some friends here at the church, really become great friends with, and when I say friends, I mean like they are prayer warriors. They're in our in the fight with us, praying for us behind the scenes. They're just walking with Jesus, encouragers, awesome. But beyond that, we also like hanging out. So that's cool.
Okay.
They've got
good to have both, right?
Yes. They have kids, and we've got kids. But one of the kids is kind of between our boys in ages. So last year we went with them to their cabin, or to a cabin up in Broken Bow, which is in Oklahoma. For those who aren't familiar with the area. It's about 3 hours away.
Lake kind of thing, or what is it?
Well, it's not a house on the lake because it's I guess it's not allowed, whatever, for that lake. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of houses in town, or in neighborhoods that are in giant forests and big elevation changes. Beautiful. It's beautiful back there. So big
awesome.
Not log cabins, but that was the feel, right? The outdoorsy, mountain cabin kind of feel. And so we went up there last year, loved it. And their daughter said, "Hey, we're going to spring break again this year, right?" And we were like, "Sure, if you want to." And so we went and did that with them again this year. And it's a lot of fun. Got up there. There's, they've got we could get out on the lake if we wanted to, but it was a little chilly, little too chilly for getting out on the lake a lot. However, the boys did want to go ahead and jump in the lake, and they were just bulldogging us about it. So I was finally like, "Yeah, sure, knock yourself out." And so,
did you jump in the lake?
No, I have passed the point in my life where that was a good idea. Now, probably a year ago, I probably still would have. I don't know.
Okay.
But
that's funny.
I'm just kidding. So I finally, aged out of that need, but the boys did, and they got there, and we were out there on the dock, and they're talking about it. Finally, they got in, and Camden, their daughter, got in as well. But every single one of them had the same response when they got in. They'd get in, they'd come up, and they'd say, I can't breathe. every time. So,
my gosh, it's hilarious.
Brock got in, he had his fill, and he got out. The other two stayed in a little bit longer, and took Barrett a little while to warm up. His lips were a little blue for a little while. So.
Yeah, man.
Anyway, so we did spend some.
When you get that eternal cold, it's almost like you can't warm up after something like that.
Oh yeah, well, and he is tall and skinny, so he doesn't have like a little extra insulation like some of his family members might, like myself. So that being said, that was fun, but the lake was beautiful. But we did some other things while we were there. We went and saw some of the other cabins around, and those were fun to look at. But in town, there's some stuff to do. They did a virtual reality thing, which was cool. I did the roller coaster and virtual reality, and I'm just going to say it just shook my stomach. It was like I was glad I didn't drink any milk beforehand, or we'd have had a milkshake. All right, I'm just telling you.
That's hysterical.
It was
Is that because it moved? Is that because it moved, or is it just because it just tricked your brain?
No, it was because it moved and it shook you violently. It was. I was like, "What do you want? How much? Just tell me. You've got it."
Yeah.
So
that's hilarious.
I give up. But we got through it. But then one day we went and played. They had miniature golf there. They've got 2 courses, and we played the old one last year, but a new one just opened up this last year, and so we went and played it. And a lot of fun.
Nothing better than a little putt-putt on a vacation, you know?
Man, it brings me back. It brings me back to the good old days of there in Nacogdoches, Texas at, what is it, North Forest Putting Course? Is that what it's called?
I think so. You and I used to work there. So
That's right.
Just down the street from us.
Snow Cone Man. So
that's right, man.
Which I say that, you might be thinking I took a left turn. There were snow cones in the putt-putt little shack. So that's why I said Snow Cone Man, because I feel like we did more snow cones than putt-putt. Anyway, but we played a lot of putt-putt growing up, right? So I channeled that inner deal, and I didn't have the heart to tell Barrett and Brock that I smoked them.
You smoked them? Oh, God. Your inner competitor came out, and you just couldn't let him have a win.
No way. You got to earn it. So
that's right.
Anyway,
that's right.
It was good times. Well, afterwards, we had some time to hang out. Now, before there was something that happened then that I want to tell you about that was really cool. But before we do, is there anything from your past week that we want to talk about before we dive into this? Or
not particularly. I mean,
y'all's spring break hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, no, our spring break aligns to the week of Easter. So this week, just kind of as an update of where I'm at, I did do kind of my last day in my previous role yesterday. That was nice. Got all my stuff moved out, cleaned up for the next guy, as you always do. And then this next 2 weeks, there'll be a little bit of, moving stuff up this week. And then we do our spring break the week right before Easter. So we're looking forward to that. And we don't have any huge plans, primarily just because of the season of life we're in. But aside from that, just a little sick. Gonna try to get a few things done in the next 2 weeks to prepare for the next role. I did learn that a really good friend of mine will be working in the same office as me. He called me up, Chris. And if you haven't heard that story or how that went, go back to somewhere in January where we talked about man plans, God decides, or something along those lines. I don't remember which episode that was. We can look it up.
The favorable no desire.
Look at those. Well, because my friend called me up. He's a solid Christian. He and I have done Bible studies in previous jobs together. And he said, "Hey, I got a phone call. It sounds like I'm going to be the right-hand man of the other guy in the office, the other really important guy in the office." No, he didn't say it. He said, I've been nominated. And actually what I said is, bah, ha, 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 ha. I was like, "I'll see you there." And he's like, no. There's a bunch of people interviewing for this. And I said, "Okay, well, call me back." I said, "Call me back when you get accepted." Anyway, so he called me back this week. He got accepted. And so I think it's really cool how God's provided a friend. He's provided a support network for me in that office. And I think it's kind of fascinating because I think your story is about to take us down a path I personally didn't even realize intersected until this very moment.
Just now. Me too.
I know,
That's
right?
hilarious.
All right, let's go.
Yeah.
You tell your story. Let's get this thing kicked.
So after we got done playing putt-putt, we go to the little shack, turn our putters in and all that. And they had those Dippin' Dots in packages or whatever that you could buy there. Who
doesn't like astronaut ice cream?
You know what? I prefer ice cream with a little taste, a little flavor, but whatever.
Okay.
But the boys wanted some. And so and so did Camden. So we got some for them, and we went over and just sat in a little seating area. It was beautiful weather. It felt so good in the shade. I mean, I'm talking like 64-ish and just sunny. Nice. It felt awesome. So we went over and sat in the shade, and they ate the that, well, while we're sitting there, Julie looks up and she says, look at those birds, look at those birds. Well, we turn and look, and there's these three blackbirds that are dive bombing this hawk, this red hawk as it's flying.
Yeah.
I mean, they won't let up. I mean, they're chasing it around and chasing it off.
Yeah, yeah.
And finally, it begins to fly off, and you see as one peels off. Well, I thought it was fascinating because any of those birds by themselves would not be able to stand up against that hawk. I mean, that hawk wins all day, every day, one-on-one.
Matter of fact, he just snatches him out of the sky. I mean, he is.
Oh yeah, it's not a problem for him. But as they joined together and went up against that hawk, that hawk just was like, all right, I'm leaving. All right, I'm gone, and he took off. Now here's what it later, as I was thinking about it, because I didn't think about this right away, but as I was just spending some time just talking to God, listening to God, he said, man, that's what it looks like to be connected to the Christian community. Because one of the things, once again, that and I did some more reading on this over the break, was just the spiritual battle that's going on. We are so consumed with the physical that we miss out that there's a spiritual battle going on every day in our lives, and the enemy's desire is to steal, kill, and destroy, to ruin your life by using your own desires of your flesh to lure you away, and to really wreak havoc as best as possible.
Yeah, in fact, I think we underestimate or appreciate the spiritual struggle that comes in day and day out. And I think a lot of times we do it as a kind of a defense mechanism of, well, Satan's not everywhere. He's not always attacking. And I do agree with that. I don't think he's around every corner. But I think we've actually, in an American sense, I think we've actually kind of slid to the wrong end of the spectrum of going, yeah, but he's in a lot more places than we realize. And it is our job as a light, as a representative of Christ, to enter those dark places and shine a light. And how much easier is it to do it when you're more than one person? And so, very interesting.
So the adverse of that is true as well. How much more dangerous is it when we get isolated? In fact, Robert, I would say this is probably one of the reasons we've seen so many pastors fall. Now, I think a lot of pastors fell and made poor choices in the past. And I don't want to dwell on this because it breaks my heart all the time. And it breaks my heart because not a single one of those pastors ever imagined it would happen to them.
Yeah.
Or I say happen to them, that they would ever end up in that place. It didn't happen to them. But at the same time,
I know what you mean.
What happens in the role of pastor is that you feel isolated and you begin to believe the lie that you're isolated, and you don't seek out the friendship and the people you need around you to take on the attack. Because here's the thing, who's the hawk coming after? The one that he can create the most havoc with, right? So he comes after the pastoral outcomes. Right.
Yeah. Well, and Chris, it's not any different even in a non-pastoral sense, right? When we have folks who go into these work environments or wherever, and they have, failed to seek Christian either fellowship or Christian support or whatever, some other Christ follower, they get in these areas, and frankly, like it's hard. It's hard to be the one and only. I've personally been there, either not of my own doing, because sometimes you get deployed in places, but then other times totally of my own doing. And it was, as we were starting this off, it kind of made me think of the verse that's in Ecclesiastes. Specifically, I think it's Ecclesiastes 4:10. If you want to read it.
Oh, I have to get my glasses out. Hold on.
It's 4:9. Oh, definitely you're reading it because I want to see your. Okay, I got it.
If you got it, go for it. I didn't mark it, so go ahead.
No, Ecclesiastes 4:9, and we were talking about this before we got started because you were mentioning the birds when you were telling me about your spring break, and I was like, man, it's just like Ecclesiastes. So anyway, Ecclesiastes 4:9 says, 2 are better than 1 because they have a good return for their work. If one falls down, his friend can help him up. But pity the man who falls and has no one to help him up. Also, if 2 lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? Though one may be overpowered, 2 can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. And it's talking about the value of friendship, right? It's talking about the value of 3-on-1, you know, sparrows versus hawk, you know?
Yeah. And Rob, what it makes me, I love the pity the man. I pity the fool, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah.
But that being said, like the old one is woe to the man. I say the old one,
Mm-hmm.
the KJV version, woe to the man, right? Um, but I think about it from the standpoint of, I think often you see people who get busy with life and they get disconnected with church, disconnected with other strong believers, source of believers. But really, church goes to be becoming something that they just don't engage in very often. And then they look up one day and they go, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like everything is not working right. Why? What went wrong? Where did I go wrong? Um, and a lot of times, if they really trace it back, they can trace it back to the moment that they stopped engaging with other believers. They stopped. Why? Because they wandered off. They isolated themselves.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's not. Most of the time it's not intentional. Maybe it's, listen, I know kids sports are incredibly busy these days, and honestly, that's one of the ways that I see it the most in the
Oh, really?
life of
Okay.
ministry is people get
Yeah.
engaged with kids sports. And listen, I got kids engaged in the sports, so I'm not beating it down at any point. But at the same time, you talk about a spiritual wrecking ball. I think that
Yeah.
so often you see it because but it's really not even a wrecking ball, because it doesn't happen all at once. It's really more of an erosion, right? It's
Yeah,
little
it
by
is.
little by
Definitely.
little by little. And it creates a gap where they feel disconnected from the church, or they feel disconnected from God, or disconnect. And then there's the shame that the enemy tries to use. Maybe you wandered off, you made a decision, whatever, to keep you isolated. Of, well,
Yep.
if you go back, people are going to feel like, where have you been, and they're going to judge you. And I used to have kids say all the time when I was in student ministry, I was like, man, you need to get back to student ministry. Come on, come see us, come see us. And they said, man, if I come, everybody's going to judge me. I'm like, nobody's judging you. Come on. I said, well, when I
Yeah,
when
yeah,
I
yeah.
walk in, when I walk in, people are going to look at me, and I'm like, they look at everybody who walked through the door. You know why? Because the door opened and they wanted to see who came in. All right.
Right,
Like,
right,
like
right.
that, the fact that you're translating that, you're turning that into, well, people are judging me. That,
That's
listen,
it's self that's
90%,
self-created.
that is self-created. Well, it's enemy created. It's the
Yeah, no,
lie
you're
of
right.
the
Yep.
enemy. It's the lie of the enemy that he wants you to buy. Then the other part of that is, if you do walk in and they do judge you, go to a different place, go to a different church. Don't just give up on the church. There
Yeah,
is a
no, I
church
agree.
that will love you, will accept you the way that God intended the church to love and accept.
Yeah. So
His people.
let's unpack this principle a little bit. That this is Solomon. Ecclesiastes was written by him. Super wise. Wrote a bunch of super wise sayings. The book of Ecclesiastes is uh, interesting in that it's really kind of a life is meaningless kind of book, but
Oh
we're
yeah,
here to praise and serve God. That's how he kind of ends it. But
yeah,
in this one portion of the passage, he develops this principle that two are better than one, and that
yeah,
three can't be broken. And
yeah,
so when we fast forward to when Jesus is doing his ministry on the earth, and in Matthew he sends out his 12, and he's not very specific as to how he sends them out. He just says he sends them out to do stuff. But in Luke actually records something a little bit different, which is later on, Jesus sends out 72 people,
right,
72 of the folks that are following him, and he sends them out in pairs. And maybe we should look at
right.
that real quick as like a kind of a establishment of, hey, if it's a principle that then Jesus followed, then maybe this is something we need to be looking at as well. Luke 10, I think, is where we're at for that one.
Yeah, I've got it, but once again, I still, for whatever reason, forgot to pull out my glasses. But here we go. 10, here we go. Starting verse 1, it says that the Lord now chose 72 other disciples and sent them ahead in pairs to all the towns and places he planned to visit. These were his instructions to them. The harvest is great, but the workers are few, so pray to the Lord who was in charge of the harvest, and ask him to send more workers into his fields. Once again, I'm going to pause there and just say he's not talking about the physical harvest. He's talking about a spiritual harvest.
Yeah.
That there's a need for workers who are other believers, other disciples, right? Like this other 72 that he's sending out to go out and help bring people in, let people know about who Jesus is, and draw and basically harvest, do the work of the harvest spiritually. It says, now
Yep.
go and remember, I'm sending you out as lambs among wolves. Don't take any money with you, nor a traveler's bag, nor an extra pair of sandals, and don't stop to greet anyone on the road. I passed something that to that I shouldn't have passed so quickly. It says, I'm sending you out as lambs among wolves. That you are innocent, but you're going out into a world full of wolves, which I think he's not talking necessarily physically,
yeah, let's
right?
pause there and talk about that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he's not talking physically.
Yeah,
he's talking that there's a predator, right? The predator is not a person, is the enemy. It's Satan and the angels of Satan, the demons, right? The spirits of evil.
Yeah. No, he's trying to isolate. So that's the thing. Satan's like main goal is to isolate and then annihilate. You know, he wants to isolate us and then annihilate us. That's his thing that he's always seeking to do. And so, part of what Jesus was doing is he's going to send these folks out to go actually demonstrate the kingdom that he is introducing and is going to be, come full consummate state of the kingdom, starting when the Holy Spirit gets here in Acts. And then of course, later on when he returns to reign, but he's sending these folks out to do all this stuff because the harvest is big and he's wants to make sure they're successful and he wants to make sure that they can be self-supporting. Because I'm sure, and we're going to get to it, I'm sure that not everybody is going to receive them well. Right? Not everybody's going to be like, yeah, come on in.
Which I think is interesting because the next thing he says, don't take anything with you, traveler's bag or money or whatever, extra pair of sandals. Now, some people go, this is because God's going to provide it. And he will. That's really part of it. But it very well could be because he's saying, because you don't need to look like someone who would be easy to rob. You don't need to have extra stuff. Okay. Right? Like once again, we're talking lambs among wolves. And then he says, because he specifically says, and don't stop to greet anyone on the road. Well, on the road is where they would be most isolated. Yeah. It's in the towns where there's other people, other witnesses. Out in the middle of nowhere is where robbers and thieves would often hide among rocks and jump people saying, hey, don't make yourself, be wise. Be wise.
Yeah, don't be easy. Don't be an easy target.
Don't be an easy target, right? But we make ourselves an easy target all the time spiritually because we make these excuses of, well, it's not that big of a deal if we miss this. It's not that big of a deal if we watch that. We're okay. Well, we can handle this. And I think Jesus is going, hey, don't make yourself such an easy target for the enemy. You keep making yourself an easy target by going, I can handle it. This is unique. Those are all lies of the enemy saying, please isolate yourself. Please make yourself easier for me to take down. So
absolutely.
Anyway,
did you want to press forward? Yeah.
Well, yeah. When you enter someone's home, first say, may God's peace be on this house. If those who live there are peaceful, the blessing will stand. If they are not, the blessing will return to you. Don't move around from home to home. Stay in one place, eating and drinking what they provide. Don't hesitate to accept hospitality because those who work deserve their pay. Now, here's the other part. If you enter a town and it welcomes you, eat whatever it says for you, heal the sick, tell them the kingdom of God is near you now. But if a town refuses to welcome you, go out into the streets and say, we wipe even the dust of your town from our feet to show that we have abandoned you to your fate, and know this, the kingdom of God is near. And he says, I assure you, even wicked Sodom will be better off than such town on judgment day. Now, the reason I think that that's important is because when you go and you join with other believers. Now, here he's actually not talking about joining with other believers, but I think there's a parallel truth here that, in other words, it's not a truth specifically speaking to this situation, but it's a parallel truth, meaning that it's true here, but it's also true here. And it's this: if you go try to uh, join the fellowship of of other believers, and they won't accept you, they won't receive you. Now, I'm not saying accept your sin. I think sin is sin, and you need to speak to
Yeah,
sin.
you need
And
to.
if you're
Yeah.
going, well, you got to accept me in my sin. Well,
Nope.
Jesus didn't. Jesus didn't
Nope.
say that.
Go and
Jesus said,
sin no more.
"I right, I love you, but hey, this needs to change." And why does he do that? Because that sin will destroy you, and he loves you too much to say, "Okay, I'll let it destroy you." He
Yeah.
loves you, and so he says, "Sin is bad for you." And so I
Yeah.
love you enough to say, "Don't do that." So I'm not saying that. I'm saying you go to other Bible believing, teaching believers, and they are so stuck uh, with their frozen chosen, and it's us four and no more, and you can't seem to find fellowship there. It's
Find
okay
someone
to
else.
dust the or knock the dust off your sandals
And move
and
on.
find another group. Because
Yeah,
here's the
well,
deal.
let's.
It makes me think of Hebrews 10. Because when
Okay.
it comes to finding a good group of people, that why this is so important, why we need one another beyond what Solomon said in Ecclesiastes, because we need each other to fight for each other, to stand up for each other, to hold each other up. Hebrews 10:24 says, "Let us think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and good works. And let us not neglect our meeting together as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that the day of his return is drawing near." Two things there. Let us think of ways to motivate one another to acts
Yeah,
of
that's my favorite
love,
part. Yeah.
right? And good works. Like when you join with other believers, it should be motivating one another. What is it? To acts of love and good works? What does that mean? That we motivate one another to live like Jesus, to
Yeah.
follow his example.
Mm-hmm.
That we should, and as we receive people, we should be receiving people. Why? Because Jesus did. I often do this illustration on stage when I'm
Okay.
talking about this. We people will link arms, link like elbow and elbow, right?
Okay.
Side
Yep.
by side, elbow and elbow. But then I'll turn them and I'll put them into a circle where they're linked elbow to elbow. And I'll say, now
Okay.
here's what happens so often is another person says, hey, I'd like to be a part of this, but they can't find a place to get in. It's
Okay.
so the arms are locked in a circle. There's no place to get in.
Yeah.
But then I scoot them into a line and I say, now here's what it should look like. Is that there's always a place, on either end. There's always a place that other people, we're inviting other people to link arms with us, to join us, to be a part of this fellowship. Why? So that we can motivate one another and
Yeah.
encourage one another. Listen, it should be an encouraging time together. When we're digging into God's truth and applying God's truth, and not encouraging as in it always makes me feel good, but encouraging and motivating as in, man, I want to be more like Jesus. There's some things I've got to do differently. I've got to step out, and I got to be courageous, and I've got to be bold, and I've got to stop sitting on the sidelines. Like that's the kind of motivation I'm talking about.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny, Chris. I was when you were talking about that, I was really thinking about we had this story from this time in my time at the Naval Academy. And I don't know if you know this, but in the Naval Academy, you have to learn these things called the laws of the Navy. It's by a guy named Admiral Hopwood, and there's all kinds of things there, and it's things like take heed of what you say of your seniors, be your words be spoken softly or plain, lest the bird of the air tell the matter, and so you shall hear it again. So it's all these like wise sayings for Navy life, or even frankly life in general. And so it makes me think a little bit of what Solomon actually said multiple times. But one of the ones that comes up, and we actually joke about it because we had a guy in our company that had more or less got isolated, not by us, but by the seniors, and they're beating him down because he was in their mind not holding the standard, and so they had him like nonstop, Chris, nonstop. I can hear it right now, even in my ear. Is he used to have to yell, "On the strength of one length of a cable, dependeth the might of the chain. Who knows when thou shall be tested, or when thou mayest be tested? So live that thou bearest the strain." And his I mean, it's I can hear him, like literally hear him in my ears, and it's been probably 25 years. But I think the point there is what you're talking about is the idea is that when we are operating and when we're executing as a Christian community, like then we're strong, right? And then the other piece of that is when we are linked hand in hand, part of it is a personal responsibility where we also have to tend to our own stuff, and we have to bear that up with each other, right? We have to. God gives us principles that we don't have to do that on our own. We don't have to strengthen our length of the chain. Like this is a Navy principle about making yourself strong, but that's not what God called us to. God actually
Right.
called us to working together and strengthening that our length of the chain through our brothers and through our sisters in Christ. And
Yeah.
you know, you talked about that motivate to acts of kindness, but I think in Galatians we were talking beforehand that it talks about bearing up one another's self.
Burdens.
And I think it's, burdens. And I think it's in Galatians 6:2 says, carry each other's burdens. In this way, you will fulfill the law of Christ. So
Do you know what the
you
law of
have
Christ? You know, he's talking about the law of Christ. What's the law of Christ? To
to love
love
one another
one another, right? He
and
says,
love
this is
God,
how
right?
you
Yeah,
know.
love God and love
Yeah.
one another,
Love.
right? And
Yeah.
so you have this perfect illustration that you're using where you're linking arms, right? But it even goes a step further than that because we bear each other burdens. We don't just bear the load of the chain. We bear the load of the chain in each other's burden, thereby making each other stronger. And Chris, one
Right.
of the things that I think I struggled with coming out of high school, and it's just, I think this, we've talked about this before, is most of my friends were your friends as far as the kind of age group peer range. In my peer range, I didn't have just a plethora of friends. That has a little bit to do with my design, the way God made me. I'm a kind of a one or two or super close friend kind of guy. But in high school, I really was struggling with friendship. I was struggling with finding somebody to walk alongside of in the same way that Christ calls us to, or the same way that Solomon explains it. And the biggest problem I had, Chris, is I was really judgy. I
Yeah.
mean, it was really hard to be my friend. It was hard to measure up to my standard to be good enough to be my friend. And so I would isolate out of pride more than anything else, frankly, because let's be
Yeah.
real, like I wasn't I didn't even meet my own standard. And
Right.
so
Right.
you know what I mean? So God taught me a lot of stuff in during that time frame, and he brought friends to me in college, really solid Christian friends. And the fact is you know what changed, Chris? It
What's
wasn't
that?
my friends. It was me.
Yeah. Yeah. You know,
It
it's
was
funny you
me.
say
I
that.
changed.
I often tell people if you're struggling to connect with others and you constantly keep coming to the same deal of, well, it's hard to find it. I just don't have much in common with those people. And, oh, their personality just keeps rubbing me the wrong
Oh
way. Or
no. Yep.
they're just too weird for me. And really, you have an excuse for all the people you struggle to connect with. You have to, at some point, look at the common denominator, right? And,
Right. Yeah.
and it comes down to the problem is with all of those excuses is here's what we're saying is that I am better than they are. They're
Yeah.
not good enough for me, which is just pride. And in fact, Paul speaks to this in Philippians chapter 2, where he says, don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble. And this is the phrase. It's almost like he's saying, in this way, be humble, thinking of
Yeah. Okay.
others as better than yourselves. The reason many people struggle to connect with people, and they may not say, well, I think I'm better than them, but all your excuses lead back to that. All your
Yeah.
reasons why lead back to that is that you've made it all about you. In verse 4, it says, don't look out only for your own interest. My schedule just doesn't work. It's not convenient for me. I've got other things I want to do. Like, reality is, once that's what he's talking about. Don't look out for your own interest, but take an
Yeah.
interest in others too, right? How do I serve others? I've heard people say, well, I don't really need anyone else. Okay, I disagree, but let me just put that on hold and say, well, maybe God wants you to use you for someone else. Maybe others need you. The reality is you've become so selfish that you can't even be used by God because you've made
Yeah.
it all about you.
I
And
literally just said this last week, Chris. Someone said, I didn't get anything out of that, whatever it was, doesn't matter. And I go, okay. And the follow on comment was, I never get anything out of that. And you know what I said, Chris? I said, well, have you ever thought about putting something in? Like, why are you there to
Yeah.
get something out?
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about putting something
Yeah.
in? Right. And
Yeah.
so to a
Yeah.
certain extent, yes, friendship is both about getting and some stuff out, right? But there is as much of getting out as there is putting in. And that's one of the things that turned for me personally in college is I stopped trying to decide what can I get out of it. And I started trying to go, well, what can I put into it? And for these people who are absolutely less than perfect and not as good as me, how can I bring them up? And I'm only being facetious. I'm just kidding.
Now,
My
I know.
point
I
being,
know.
yeah. That is a joke.
Yeah.
No, the thing is I realized that, hey, I'm as much of a messed up human as anyone else, and I have as little to offer as they do in my mind, right? Because I had this pendulum shift. I had a shift from this pendulum of no one was good enough for me, and so my pendulum had to swing back all the way to the other side to then come back to the center, right? Which was no, you have nothing to provide, and you aren't that great, and so anybody who is willing to be your friend is a good friend, right? And so now my pendulum swung back a little bit more to the middle to where that's a little bit more balanced, but God needed to bump me out of that because I had gotten myself so self isolated. Taking me down was no problem. Like it was the hawk sparrow situation. Like there were no other two sparrows. It was just me and the hawk. And
Yeah.
so anytime Satan wanted to bring me down, not a problem. And so you know what my biggest fear walking into this next season was? This season up in up in the new job, and just being real for a second. Biggest season is that I'd be alone.
Yeah. Isolation.
Yeah, and so when the Lord brought about the kind of the response that He did
Yeah.
here recently, when He called me and said, "Hey, I'm on this short list, but there's much other people, and I don't want to do it," I just started laughing because I was like, "A, it's answering a prayer I had, okay,
Yeah.
and B, it's exactly what I needed. God knew what I needed, and God knew what I needed
Yeah.
before I stepped out, and you know, He heard my heart, which was I can't do isolation." And so I think what happens, Chris, and then I'll pick it back over, let you kind of pull us back over. Is I think sometimes we not just get isolated because of shame or get isolated just because of the drift, the kind of that slow erosion you were talking about. I think sometimes we get isolation because we just feel a little beat down,
Yeah.
like you know. I got to try again, and I just keep striking out, and I'm just swinging, and I just keep missing, and I keep missing, and I keep missing. And the only thing I have to say to that is sometimes it's just a grind, and sometimes you just got to keep swinging, and you got to keep finding, and you got to keep praying, you got to keep asking,
Hmm.
and you know the idea is that you've got to like you can't stop looking, and you can't stop
Yeah.
trying, you can't stop reaching out, and to your point earlier, there's going to be the frozen chosen, the ones that you have to kind of dust the feet off, you know, the dust off your feet and say, hey, we're clearly not going to be friends, but there's other people who need friends. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of my encouragement to those who are like, yeah, but I hear you guys. I've tried to engage. It hasn't worked out. Okay. I fully understand that. I've been there. Um, but don't stop pushing in that direction. Don't stop striving. Don't stop moving in the direction of trying to find Christ fellowship, because He calls us to bear each other's burdens. That doesn't mean
Yeah.
other people bearing our burdens alone. It's us bearing other people's burdens as well. Somebody needs you to help bear their burdens,
That's
and
right.
that's my encouragement.
Yeah.
Um,
That's good. I
yeah.
think, Rob, along those lines, I think of Proverbs 27:17. I was a part of a ministry in college called Brothers Under Christ. It's a Christian fraternity. It's a national Christian fraternity. It's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And really, to sum up, the heart of why it started in 1985 was they looked at the other fraternities and said, why can't a group of followers of Jesus, brotherhood of Christians, have the same kind of brotherhood or better, since we have the common bond of Jesus Christ? So it started with the deal of going, we need each other. And really, because of our relationship with Jesus, we have something to be united on that should give us greater unity and greater brotherhood. And so it was established in 1985 to create brotherhood and unity among college men based on the common bond of Jesus Christ. Now, one of the founding verses is Proverbs 27:17 that says, as iron sharpens iron, so a friend sharpens a friend. Listen, we will never be as sharp spiritually as we need to be on our own.
Amen.
In fact, we're
Mm-hmm.
making ourselves vulnerable to attacks, and we need each other. I need other people. I've got people who are in my corner, just like those people I was talking about that we went on the strip with. They're in my corner fighting for me, praying for me, and others that are praying for me, other teams of people who are praying for me, praying for us, praying for our church. Why? Because isolation is a trap, right? We need each other. And so, I would just say this. Go ahead.
Let me jump in. I'm going to let you get final words, because I think what I want to do is give some practical thought processes for what I see on my side. You, from your side, do some practical thought process, and then give us kind of a final thought, because I think this is absolutely the kind of the apex or the culmination of all the things that we've kind of pulled together. And so if you're like, okay, I'm convinced I need to go bear somebody else's burdens, or I need someone else to bear my burdens. What is, you know what I mean? What does that even look like? How do I even start? Right. Well, aside from what Chris talked about earlier, which is, getting involved in getting to church, being involved in a small group, the other ways that I always encourage folks to do is, yes, small groups. Absolutely. If you can't find a small group that fits you, keep looking. If not, and sometimes, churches dependent, small groups, they don't work out, and that's that's part of it. But what I will tell you, there are small groups that aren't called small groups in church. They're called the service areas, whether it's serving in the worship, or in the technical stuff, or maybe serving in your church's service areas. Maybe y'all have a service project team. If you don't have a service project team, maybe it's time for you to create one. There's plenty of service to be done in your church. I promise you that. I don't even have to know what your church is. And I know there are people who are waiting on you to serve them. And so that team, right? So get a part of a service team, get a part of some sort of a, small local Bible study that you start or someone else's starts. But bottom line is, it may have to be self-generated by you. Okay. Or it may be something that's waiting on you to contribute. Because again, it's not about what do you get out of it. It's what are you putting into it. And so my encouragement is to take active steps to find the place, and don't stop stepping, don't stop looking, don't stop kind of doing. Before you know it, you'll look around like I have with our small group, Chris. And I'm like, man, I was like, so many. And of course I jokingly call them so many of my my kiddos that aren't really my kiddos, right? Because these are, they're not even, I'm not old enough to be their parents, but I see all their little children, and I see them as my grandchildren, right? As a joke, right? As a joke. So I know they listen, but I love them. And that has been our community. That's been our community. The areas I've served, that's been our community. That's where Hillary has her community. And so that's where you need to go look and start you've got to get involved. And these are the ways to do it. Over you for kind of your final thoughts on how to do it, get involved.
Well, just an aside, by the way, when I was up there for your pinning, it was very funny to meet your small group people, because they're like, "Oh, you're Chris," and we already know you. You don't have to introduce yourself to us. You don't.
No, they know who you are. They know who you are.
Anyway,
they've heard about you long before the Bible study. I've told them all about you.
Oh gosh, yeah. Well, it was fun meeting them. But here's what I just go back to, and this is years of ministry. Is one, if you need that kind of community, just first of all, ask God. God, just be honest with God. God, I need some community. I need some people to help bear the burden. I need a cord of 3 strands, and right now I'm all alone. I need that to seek it out. Go and take a risk. Inject yourself into those situations that he just talked about. And 3, give grace. Give grace. What I mean by that is nobody's going to be perfect. There's not going to be a perfect situation. And guess what?
Yeah.
They are going to need to give you grace too, because you're not perfect either. That's the story of my life, is that I've got to give grace because I need other people to give grace to me freely. I need it greatly. All right. So be willing to give grace freely. But then the other part of community is, don't be weird about it. Okay. Here's what I'm saying. What I mean by that is, just learn to hang out with people. Learn to just be present. Just learn to ask questions, to get to know people, their story, their background, where they're from, what they like. And just be relational. And I think we've lost the art of friendship today because of, so many reasons. We don't have to dig into all that. But come back to that. Come back to just being present with people. Go and listen, guys, go and ride mountain bikes together. Go fishing together. Go do stuff together. It doesn't always have to be, hey, we're going to build this Christian fellowship together. Right. So we've got to sit down and do in-depth Bible study. You know what? Yeah. You can build Christian fellowship around a barbecue pit. All right. You just be with other people who are godly people and begin to grow and just, ask people, hey, what's your relationship with God like? Hey, what's God teaching you right now? You don't have to ask that all the time, but I would just say, man, that's how you build that fellowship together. Because when it comes down to it, the reality is woe to the man who is all alone, who falls down, has no one to pick him up. Let's stop being that. Let's be the cord of three strands that is not easily broken.
Amen.